Hello there, everyone, and welcome back to Tech Republic. Thank you for joining us for today's webcast, Showdown in New Mexico, Google Apps versus Microsoft Exchange. We'll be talking to you about how one government agency chose Google, and we'll be sharing that story. We have a living, breathing case study on board with us today, and glad to have that. I'll be introducing our guest speaker in just a moment. I want to remind you this webcast is brought to you by Google. My name is James Hilliard. Happy to be on board as the moderator for today's event. And joining me again back at Tech Republic is Serena Sadiasai. She is a product marketing manager with Google. We'll be hearing from Serena throughout today's presentation. Thanks again for joining us, Serena.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
And our featured speaker is James Ferreira. He serves the New Mexico public as Attorney General Gary King's Chief Information Officer. James is tasked with really the big responsibility of facilitating the communication between the public there in New Mexico and nearly 200 office staff, including the attorneys on staff there. James, really do appreciate you taking time and joining us today. And a little bit of a different seat for you. About a year or so ago, you were actually in attendance on one of these webcasts doing your due diligence and doing some research, and now here you are. We've wrangled you into the speaker's role to share your story. Maybe that's a warning to some of our other attendees, but I'm glad that transformation took place, and welcome to the webcast today.
Great. Thank you, James, and thank you for having me on today.
Absolutely. Let me share with the audience a real quick agenda, then I want to get into a poll question before we really dive into our content. We're going to take a couple minutes up front here just to talk about Google Apps. We definitely have some folks on board that are not familiar with Google Apps, and so we want to share a little bit about that. Then we're really going to jump into the conversation with James and really talk about what their story was. What were they on? What did they evaluate? What did they move to? What's been the benefit? What's kind of the future for them? Throughout the presentation, we're going to try and mix in Q&A as well. Definitely looking to save about 10 or 15 minutes at the end for a formal kind of Q&A section. But get the questions in early and often. I've already seen Joel, Paul, Randy, Dennis, and Patricia have all sent some notes into us, so definitely we'll be focusing on some of those as we move through the presentation. A couple poll questions that we have planned for today. Some of this gives us just some information about you as audience members so that we know kind of what information to present to you. First question on the screen, what's your awareness level of Google Apps? Are you not familiar? Are you somewhat familiar? Are you currently evaluating Google Apps to see if it can meet some type of near-term need that you have? Or do you happen to be considering Google Apps as part of a longer-term strategy for your organization? So definitely go ahead and answer that. Again, mark which one of those options best describes you. We'll share those results with the audience in just a few moments here. As you're answering that, I want to remind you about a few other things. On our player, there's the Ask a Question box, lower portion. Type in those questions and comments. Again, like I said, Joel, Paul, and others have done, and we will get you queued up, Matthew as well, to try and get to as many of the questions as we can. Just make sure you hit that blue Ask bubble. A couple of downloads available. You can get a PDF of the presentation today right from the player, so I encourage you to click on that. You will need your pop-up blockers turned off to take advantage of that and a few other items on the player. And then finally, some related resources on the right-hand side of the player. We'll talk about those in a little more detail as we move through the presentation. Serena, a good majority of our audiences answered the poll question here, well over 150 or so. So I'm going to go ahead and share those results with everybody. We've got about 25%, almost a quarter of this audience, not familiar with Google Apps. Definitely we're going to do some share some knowledge today, let them know what Google Apps is all about. Handful, definitely more than that, looking that they know what it is and kind of some of the values for the company. And then you see we've got a fair amount that are already kind of considering it for some type of solution. Let's do this. For those that are not familiar, we promise not to bore those that are familiar, but we'll quickly just kind of recap what's available from Google in terms of Google Apps for the enterprise, and then we'll dive into that case study with James. So with that, Serena, let me turn things over to you, and we'll dive into some of the content.
Great. Thanks, James. First of all, just as an introduction, Google provides several solutions for IT, including Google Apps. The other products in our product line include the Google Search Appliance, which enables customers to basically leverage Google Search technology, but behind your firewall and across multiple content repositories. Many people are also familiar with Google Maps and probably Google Earth, whether you're looking for driving directions or just like to zoom in on your home, for example, with Google Earth. But we also offer enterprises business editions of those products so that you can do things like asset tracking. Or if you're a government agency, use Google Earth, for example, to represent your government information. And again, those products are provided so that you can use those behind your firewall and also provide additional support that you wouldn't get in just a consumer version of those products. Many people may also be aware that Google acquired Postini a couple of years ago, and Postini offers standalone email security and archiving in the cloud, but a lot of that functionality has also been incorporated into Google Apps as well. Since it seems like there's quite a few people who are still trying to get familiar with what Google Apps is, let me go into a little bit of a detail here, description of it. Google Apps is really a suite of applications. One part of the suite is focused on messaging. This would include Gmail for your domain. So if you would like to swap out an Exchange server or a Lotus Notes Domino server in the back end, you can do that replacing it with Gmail, and it would support your company's email address. So it would be your name at yourcompany.com. A couple of the neat things about the Gmail platform is that we provide 25 gigabytes of storage per inbox. There's actually built-in spam protection, and with a double layer of antivirus and anti-spam protection included also by Postini, you don't need to buy an additional antivirus anti-spam product. We also include a calendaring function that looks like your basic calendaring function, but also allows you to do things like share your calendar publicly if you wish, or create a team calendar that can be shared across domains, and it certainly includes the ability to do any resource scheduling, conference rooms or projectors and things like that. We've also built into the messaging applications integrated instant messaging that you can use either plain text instant messaging, video, or voice. And of course, what is neat about instant messaging is that it helps coworkers kind of see each other's presences. So, for example, if someone's available or not available because they're in a meeting. All of that is provided with browser-based access. You don't need to use any clients if you don't want to. On the collaboration side, our suite includes Google Sites, which are basically an easy web publishing tool that people can use to create team workspaces, whether those teams are internal to your company or even, for example, what a lot of our customers will do is create a team workspace that crosses the firewall so that you can collaborate with your suppliers or you can collaborate with your customers, for example. It is very much permission-based, so depending upon how you want to set up access, you could share a Google site with just one other person. You could share it with 20 other people. But, of course, as the owner of the Google site, it's up to you. Google Docs are basically online versions of word processing, spreadsheets, and presentations. And the thing that's different and unique about them is that it supports real-time collaboration. So what that means is that if you're working with a team of 5 other people on a particular document, all of you can edit that document in real time. What it saves in terms of hassles is that no one has to condense all of the edits across multiple people. You can all literally be working off the same page at the same time. And then Google Video for Your Business is a web-hosted video solution. It's essentially like YouTube for your domain. It's for internal sharing, and again, it's secure and permission-based, as with the other collaboration apps. All of these applications are built to be delivered in the cloud, and there is disaster recovery included in all of these, as well as a web-based administrative control panel for any moves, adds, and changes that you want to make, usage reporting. And as I said, there are additional services by Postini that have been incorporated, for example, a second layer of antivirus anti-spam protection, as well as content monitoring and filtering, and a secure transmission policy-enforced TLS by Postini if you want to lock down secure transmissions between domains, for example. I'm going to try to answer some of the questions that I've seen come up already. The pricing is $50 per user per year. There's been a lot of confusion in past webcasts. So that's $50 per user per year Some people think it's a monthly figure, but it's not. It's an annual figure. Customer support is provided for Google Apps Premier Edition. Customer support is provided in the way of online support, but also phone support if you have an issue. We also provide a 99.9% uptime SLA. If we don't hit our own objective goal of 99.9% uptime SLA, there is a financial credit that gets paid back to the customer. And for Google Apps Premier Edition, we include integration APIs, a partner program, mobile options, and I think James Ferreira will be talking a little bit about how he's actually used some of these additional things. And of course, for the Google Apps Premier Edition, it is an ad-free. It is ad-free, so you could turn off ads for your employees. I hope I've answered some of the questions as we've gone along. Certainly, if you have more questions, what we really encourage people to do is reach out and talk to one of our product specialists. We have migration tools and services, whether you're coming from Microsoft Exchange or Lotus Notes Domino, for example, and you want to talk about which types of data you want to migrate or not migrate. We do have APIs that can help make the migration smoother and also for integration. If you want to do, for example, single sign-on. We also provide the ability for you to continue to support Microsoft Outlook users, for example, if you would like to support, continue to support a local client, and also BlackBerry support users if you would like to support a native interface with BlackBerry. And finally, I think one of the things that you'll probably hear from James and a lot of our other customers, what's neat about Google Apps too is that we support a wide range of mobile options. So if you have employees who are using iPhones or BlackBerries or just regular cell phones, they can easily sync up their Gmail information if they wish to. And with that, I'd really like to just hand it over to James Ferreira now.
Great. Thank you, Serena. That was wonderful information about apps. Well, hello, everyone, and I'm really excited to be able to talk about this subject. It's something that we've been doing a lot of research on for a number of years, and this is a wonderful platform, so thank you all for joining me. And I'm going to try to move through a lot of this material very quickly. We do have a lot of time for questions and that kind of thing, so and I'll try not to bore you, of course, because I have been on these before where they get a little long. Basically, the agenda, we're going to talk about why a new email system, what we needed there, how we ended up deciding by setting our own standards and finding out what it was that we needed and then comparing the products to that. I'll do a head-to-head comparison. I'll talk about our actual implementation and how that went. And then I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing beyond the email component.
Yeah, moving forward there. All right, we got it, James. Good.
Sorry, my button wasn't working there, but it's going now. So let's see. First of all, the New Mexico Attorney General's office represents the public in legal issues. We have 3 offices, one in Albuquerque, one in Santa Fe, and one in Las Cruces. So we're spread across the entire state. About 200 staff. 120 of those, approximately 120, it kind of goes up and down, are attorneys. So that makes us the largest law firm in New Mexico as well. We litigate cases that go into the hundreds of millions of dollars. So, security, confidentiality, those were all really big issues for us when we were considering a solution for our email. So when we started looking around, what we had an exchange system, and it was really in need of being upgraded. It's 2003, single server with 200 users on it. We looked into a lot of different replication type systems and different ways to have failover, and really we needed something that was more reliable. And the reason why is, if email goes down for any reason, whether it's somebody's done something wrong in the server room and they've pulled out the wrong wire or whatever. It doesn't necessarily have to be the software itself that fails, just even a bad internet connection. And, once email stops, everybody stops working. You could walk through the halls and people are on a coffee break and they're like, well, I can't get any work done because I can't send anybody an email. So, it's really, it is definitely core to our business operation to have, very reliable email system. And you know, when we looked at it from a cost analysis perspective, if nobody's working because their email's down, then you know we can actually obtain a direct loss from that, and it's a pretty high number. It's, you know, it can be as high as $3,000 an hour, and you know, the problem with the state agency is, you know, you can't raise the what you charge on your product by a couple cents and recoup the cost from a half a day's, you know, worth of lost productivity. You just can't do that. So it's a direct loss. So we wanted to definitely look at a system that was going to be very reliable and not cost the taxpayers, you know, money from direct loss.
And James, just to clarify, were you having a lot of downtime and a lot of outages more than normal in your opinion?
We did a pretty good job of keeping our Exchange system running, and really, you know, it was more of a matter of, you know, because we're separated over 3 offices, you know, it doesn't always get relayed. So yeah, we were definitely having at least one outage a month, actually. And when I say outage, it may only have been, you know, 10 minutes, but you know, nonetheless.
Nonetheless, that's an outage, and that's something again that you don't want to have to be dealing with, worrying about. And if you know that it's constantly happening, you're counting almost the days, like, haven't had an outage for about 25 days. Wonder when it's coming.
Well, that's true. You know, and you know, people. It wasn't just necessarily an outage of intake. You know, a lot of times we would have trouble, you know, because of bandwidth saturation and things like that. We would have, you know, we would have where we couldn't connect to where the Outlook client couldn't connect to the server, or something like that. So there was a lot of jokes going around the office about that too. You know, so we really want the solution that was very reliable, but also lightweight enough to where it wasn't a huge bandwidth hog, you know, on our network.
Makes sense.
A little more detail on that. The document, basically what we started seeing was we started off with 30 megabyte mailbox inbox sizes in 2005. Or at the end of 2005, and everybody was constantly deleting messages and complaining about their inboxes being full. So we had, as part of our normal upgrade procedure, we'd installed some new SANs, and so we had more storage available on the network, and we did a 10 times increase on mailbox size and brought them up to 300 megabytes, and that really pacified everybody pretty well for almost a year, and then they hit the limit again. So we were like, well, you know, why is that going on? And when we started looking at user behavior, we started noticing, well, everybody wants to use their email client as a document storage and management system. So they're emailing documents back and forth so that they can have, you know, an efficient way of doing that. And also we communicate a lot with outside counsel. So if there's a defense attorney that needs certain documents, a lot of times these are PDF documents and they're quite large, so they're getting emailed back and forth and those kinds of things. And we started seeing that, well, because they're using it like a file system, the inboxes are filling up quickly and they need to be large. So we did a little bit of a growth analysis, and we took some of the average growth of the web over the last several years and applied that through some different algorithms, and came up with the number of 10% yearly increases is what we kind of narrowed it down to, which meant that we were going to have some pretty big inboxes, you know, at least, and we decided that since people were going to use their email like a file system, we needed to look at them being able to manage files over their entire career, so not just on a monthly or yearly basis, but 25 years worth of storage space for their email, that they could go back and get that at any time they need it. Because you never know. And a lot of times, you know, you might have a case, especially with us, with a case, or we're also a law enforcement agency, so it may be, the case might be investigation, or it might be consumer advocacy or something like that. And similar things seem to pop up year after year. It might be 5 years ago that you had a big case that had all that information. You want to be able to go back and get that and not have to wade through server backup tapes and those kinds of things for information that had to be deleted a long time ago. So just search for it, and there it is. So what we started seeing was our calculation said we're going to need at least 2 gigabytes per user, and possibly more depending on how much bigger files get. It seems like every day the file size, the average attachment size gets bigger. And our current system was limited. The Exchange 2003 has a cap of 75 gigabytes on the database, but in reality, our database was running around 16 gigabytes, and it was difficult to back it up. Really, we had a lot of trouble backing it up. We tried several different products. One of them was quite expensive, and it never really worked the way we wanted it to. But when you go to restore one of those databases, that takes a lot of time as well, because it has to be able to check and make sure it's consistent and that kind of thing. So we could be talking, even if you do have a backup point and a backup server to go to immediately, it could still be hours before you've restored service. And that was on a 16 gigabyte database, and the numbers just go up as it gets bigger. So 75, we couldn't even imagine restoring that large of a database. When users would run out of file space, and even at 300 megabytes, they were running out quite often. So they'd create the local PST files to save stuff off. But problems with that is, we aren't backing up workstations here. We're only backing up server-based things. PST files on the server tend to be glitchy or get corrupted, and then we'd have to go to our backup of the PST file and restore that, and then we're talking a lot more IT time to do that. So we really didn't want users to have to be creating these PST files. They're not available when they're remote, and because these attorneys are moving around to different cases, or they may be doing litigation in a courtroom where they need to also have access to email and things like that. We really needed all their stuff in one place. And for us, we didn't have a method for doing discovery on PST files. The state of New Mexico, they also have we're an independent state agency from the larger New Mexico state IT system. So we've been watching they also have a very similar email system to ours. It's 2003, single instance servers with no clustering and that kind of thing. And, we saw that they had several security breaches of their email system. And we were thinking, well, they've got full-time IT security people, and we don't. We're a fairly small staff, so we had to, we can't hire a full-time security person to be looking at nothing but email security. And so we really needed a product that had very tight security that didn't have to be monitored and checked on and make sure all the updates had been applied. Now we passed security testing and found that, we didn't have any holes. So it wasn't that we were, but, you're always just that one patch away from being hacked. So that was always a big concern for us, not being able to have a single person concentrate on nothing but security.
Well, it's a big concern, James, for our whole audience. In fact, Dennis was the first person to type in a question to us today. Now we've gone over 95 questions that have already come in. But Dennis's first one was, how did the Attorney General's office satisfy itself that confidential information would be adequately protected with Google? And I'm assuming that, again, other people have asked the security question already. That had to have been one of your top criteria, correct, James?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that probably security was the number one thing that we were wanting to look at when we started looking at, and at first, when we started thinking security, we were thinking, this is Gmail. It's anybody can have a Gmail account. How can that be secure, and how can we manage that? And when we started looking at the specifics of apps is, an enterprise-level system that is built off the Gmail platform. So while it shares all the same similarities, it's different between consumer grade and enterprise grade. So when we started looking at the contracts we have with Google, and of course we have plenty of legal staff to look at contracts.
I bet you do.
We considered it really carefully and have them go over and make sure that our privacy would be protected. Which it is.
And we'll look at, I know we're going to look at a little bit more in the presentation. We'll look at some of the real criteria that you guys set up and
sure.
that. But Dennis, appreciate that. Again, hopefully folks that talks a little bit to the security. Obviously, it was a major concern for James and his staff, and it was something that was satisfied as you heard from him. About halfway through the presentation, I'm going to put it back in James's hands in just a moment. Again, we have 95 plus questions that have already come in. We're not going to get to all of those. What we're doing on the back end here is just looking for kind of some trends we see in some of the questioning, and we're going to try and get to as much of that as we can. Questions we don't get to, we're going to forward on to Google, Serena, her team, and we'll try and follow up with some information so we can answer a good amount of the questions. But keep them coming in, and again, we'll pick what we can to get through. James, with that, why don't we continue to move forward on the presentation here, and we'll keep mixing some questions as we move forward.
Great. So like I said, once we decided that we really needed to upgrade our email system to something new, and we looked at the different products, we said, well, let's first set our standards and see which products are going to meet those standards. And also, with all government agencies and private business as well, we're in a budget crisis. So, we needed to look at something that would also either maintain our current cost expenditures or lower them. So, that was also a very big consideration after security. We decided we needed something that was redundant. It had to be clustered. It had to have automatic failover so that it was always available, and, of course, multi-city failover as well for us, so that if the power grid's out in one city, that doesn't mean that the next city is not going to have email. So it needed to be multi-city, multi-grid, and basically be fully redundant. The storage space had to be huge. We needed at least 2 gig per user, and possibly, maybe even more than that, but we needed to be manageable as well. And we wanted something that was simple. One of our biggest things that we spent time on was email. Whether it was on the server side or it was on the client side, about 50% of our IT time was being spent just on email, which isn't terribly unexpected because it is our number one tool, I guess, aside from the actual writing of documents and things like that. But for communication, it's used more than the phones are. And then, of course, the last criteria was very high security. We had to be sure that we weren't going to get hacked and lose confidential information. So head-to-head, the first thing we looked at, of course, since we were in an Exchange environment, we thought, well, let's look at the next level of Exchange. And Exchange 2007, had some great features. It can be clustered. It meets our storage capacity. It doesn't have the same cap that you find in 2003. It has an improved web interface over the last one, and but it had some issues with working well on Macs and Linux, and we are a mixed OS environment, especially when you get to, a lot of our attorneys like to work from home, in the evenings and things like that to finish up cases or whatever, so they needed to be able to have good remote web interface. But some of the problems we had with Exchange were we were going to have to either have a dedicated security staff or someone that was going to be able to manage a larger infrastructure. We were planning on 6 servers and a 2-node cluster, and taking care of those, making sure they're all online and they all have rollover capability, and that everything's staying consistent from one end to the other. But really, we couldn't increase our staff. That's just not. It's regulated by the legislature, so we actually changed that. The total cost of that came up to $300,000 every 5 years, as we assume that there's going to be a new Exchange out every 5 years that we would want to upgrade to, and keep keep those maintenance agreements and that kind of thing going from year to year. We didn't really look at any Linux-based solutions just because we are basically off network, so we weren't really ready. We didn't have the staffing to be looking at manage a Linux-based enterprise email system. So then we took a look at Google Apps, and we looked at some other enterprise Exchange 2000 hosting services as well. Google Apps wasn't the only hosted service we looked at. But all of the quotes we got on hosted Exchange came back really high, higher than what we're spending now, and higher than what we could buy an improved version from through the state IT for as well. So most of them were somewhere around $28 a month per user, so they were quite expensive. Google Apps guaranteed us a 99.9% uptime, 25 gigabyte storage, which was just huge. It's almost inconceivable how big that really would be for us, considering we were at 300 meg. So we knew for sure that would definitely meet our criteria of storing, an entire career's worth of emails. Worked great from every. We went into it with a let's do a test group for a year and see how it works. It's still a really new product, so we tried it on every browser and every different kind of computer and OS, and it worked great on everything. So we knew it was going to be a good solution, and it didn't have anything extra you had to install to make it work. And we looked at their security, and Google data centers are so well protected. They may be one of the safest places on earth, from what we've seen from the documentation. But they have specialized security people that are there 24/7 that can take care of security, where it's a part-time job for us. So we knew that we were actually looking at a security upgrade by going with Google Apps over what we could actually build or provide ourselves. One of the other issues on security is in our system, if we were to have an internal breach of some kind, and you gained access to the data, the Exchange database, you could read all that email. Where if you breach the way Google obfuscates the data, if you breach an account, then you have access to that account, but that doesn't give you access to all the accounts. So we saw that as also being a really good feature. It was cheap, really, for us. $10,000 a year was extremely cheap. So huge cost savings over Exchange 2007, and in a lot of ways, it may have come down to that. We've received almost 5% budget cuts, and of course, when you're trying to represent the public, the money is always going to go toward doing the litigation and the investigation first. And if we have to write on legal pads, and that's what we have to do, IT is always going to be at the end of the line when it comes to the budget handout. So we knew we needed something that was going to reduce the total over IT costs. We really ended up getting a whole lot more when we looked at Google Apps, and then of course just before we deployed, we found that they had the new Outlook Sync connector, which made it very, very compatible with Outlook, and that actually was really exciting for us because our users, some of them wanted to stay with Outlook. So let's move right on to the big implementation. We called it the Great Migration and things like that. We took kind of a different approach. There's basically two main approaches out there that people will take, where you can do a big bang approach and just switch everybody. The next day they come in and they've got Gmail instead of whatever else they had, or you can go through more of a managed user by user process. And we had originally run a pilot for 10 users. Some of them were attorneys and some of them were communications that do a lot of writing, a lot of collaboration of documents and things like that. And after a year of testing, that group came back and said, we can't imagine not having this. So, we knew that it was going to be a good fit for everyone that had tried it. the actual, when we decided to make the switch to the Premier Edition and move our email over, it was really, it literally was minutes. We basically changed our MX record and changed a setting on the Google administrative panel, and that's it. Email was flowing where it needed to go. It was actually pretty amazing. There was no problem with that at all. And then what we did was we created a dual delivery system to where the Exchange server was still getting email, but we were also delivering it to the Google Apps accounts. So really, when we made the switch, nobody even knew. We had told users we would be making the switch, and we've been prepping them all along for several weeks that we'd be going to a new email system, but the impact would be low, and they could choose to use the new web interface or stick with Outlook if they wanted to do that, and it was completely up to them how they wanted to manage their email. And so then after that, we went user to user and installed the Google Sync connector and then moved their emails up to Google. And then at that point, they could essentially they could open the Google web interface and use their email there, and also open Outlook at the same time, and send one email from one or the other from the other, and they'd see them both within a couple seconds update to each other. So they really truly had a choice of what they wanted to use as a client, and that was really important to us because people don't like change, and I think that probably the biggest thing with any kind of a migration to an email system, whether you're going from Exchange to Lotus or to Google Apps or whatever it is, change management is always going to be your biggest issue over the technology. So we wanted to make sure that they were comfortable. So after going user by user, we actually had a pretty good system once we migrated everyone over. There was no disruption in their work, and they were just able to keep going. We were able to move their PST files up to Google as well through the same Outlook Sync connector. So where they used to have PST files that they couldn't access remotely, now they could access those remotely. It was all in one place. We could do backups and recovery and things like that on it. What we ended up finding out, we just, after we migrated everybody over, made sure that they had the choice to where they could go back and forth between the different clients. We waited a couple months and we gave them a survey and said, well, what are you using? Because we wanted to know, well, where should we be focusing the most of our training and further understanding how to, utilize the technology. We found that almost everybody had started using the Gmail interface, and very few people were still using Outlook, even though they were given the choice to go either way. And the basic consensus was that it just worked better. It was faster, and they liked how it organized their conversations. It would stack emails together with the same subject, and the searching was just lightning fast. So they really found that it was more productive to use the web interface than to use Outlook, so they did make that change. So moving right along here to beyond the email, the cost savings, they were really a compelling reason to move over, but we found that we were able to get rid of our BlackBerry server. We have a pretty small group of BlackBerry users, and we've never really had much of a reason to need to manage those specifically from a centralized server. So this gave us the ability to do Gmail on the BlackBerry. They could just grab the BlackBerry and set it up. They didn't have to register it. And it also let them have their own, which was a huge cost-saving thing for us, is a lot of people just have phones with data plans. And they were like, well, I'd just like to get it on my phone. I don't necessarily need you to give me an attorney general's phone. I just need it on my phone. So they were able to just install the Gmail client on their phone, and just away they go with their Gmail. Also worked great on iPhones and the Android phones. So it really broadened how much impact we could do on a mobile basis without increasing our costs. So that was really really very handy. The other thing that, because you can do texting through the Gmail chat interface that's built right into the email client, you can do text messaging through there, so you can have a conversation with somebody that doesn't have a data phone where it's just, standard cell phone, which we have a lot of those running around. And since text messaging is free on our service, we were able to almost get sort of a email experience through a standard cell phone. So that was really great. One of the big things that we discovered, and this is for us here in New Mexico, where we are a bilingual state, and a lot of our attorneys speak Spanish as their first language, and we wanted them to be able to have translation, and that we discovered that that's built right into the Gmail interface. So whether you're an English speaker and say somebody that needs help in the public sends you an email in Spanish, the Gmail interface will automatically translate that for you so that you can read it and be able to respond to them. Or if your preferred language is Spanish, when your colleagues send you an email, it'll translate it into Spanish. Send you an email in English, it'll translate it to your native language so that you can feel more comfortable. So that was really our people were very excited about that. They really enjoyed that. We reduced our long-distance phone call bill we almost cut it in half by using chat over telephone. So now we have chat, we have video chat built in, so we can do a basic teleconferencing thing without having to set up additional services or phone services. So those were some really, really big things beyond there. We found out that through the use of APIs and gadgets, so we can add additional features to the Gmail interface. So I've got a little picture up here where we've got our virtual desktop infrastructure where it can be launched directly from the Gmail program. This little gadget sits over on the left-hand side of the Gmail interface, and it gives some news, so we can give updates on what the latest news is and allow some additional features. And these are something that are actually quite easy to program, and just you provide all kinds of information, including access to documents and case studies and things like that. Something else that we started looking at this is like, once we started realizing what we had a hold of, we realized it wasn't just email. It was actually an entire platform that had applications that were easy to build and could be extended to do all sorts of things. So, for instance, here in this slide I'm talking about where we had an attorney that came to us and said, well, I really need to get input from the public on environmental crimes, and I need a form on the website that they can enter in their information, and that'll get to me. So our normal process would be to have the web developer develop the page and have the database developer develop the website or the database, and we have to make sure the servers can all handle it and all the infrastructure. Well, that would typically take us about a month to get everything up and running. In addition to the load we already have on those key staff members. With apps, we were able to put together in a day the exact same product and embed it into the web page. It was really pretty amazing. And not only did it have the form that brought in the information, it returned a map to the website that showed where reports had been made. So we were able to not only just do intake of public information, we were able to also extend that onto giving some pushback on what we're getting to. So that was really exciting for us. So really, I guess I'm going to wrap up here. I included a couple links of different places where the deployment website, the Google's deployment website, is absolutely essential to go there. And if you're looking at deployment, there's just a ton of information. But then beyond that, there's Google partners, there's consulting and things like that can help make the switch over. But in reality, it's very, very easy to do. And once you've trained an administrator up with some basic knowledge, it almost runs itself. It's really pretty amazing.
James, a lot of good information you've shared. If folks want access to these links, they can click the download slides button from their player. That'll give them a PDF of the presentation, and that'll allow you all to go ahead and get that information. So I encourage you folks to go ahead and do that. One of the other things I want to remind you is we will be getting into some Q&A here in just a couple of moments. So make sure to stay tuned for that. A lot of good questions are queued up. What I want to do is push out a poll to the audience right now, and we're going to bring Serena back in from Google in just a moment. But I want to hear from you in the audience. Obviously, you've heard James's story. You heard some of the drivers that he had that made him move towards Google Apps. We want to know from you, and you can pick two of them. What are your main drivers in considering Google Apps? Is it reduce total cost of ownership? Is it trying to modernize your collaboration platform, increase flexibility and scalability? Is it trying to free up IT time to focus on some strategic initiatives? Or are you trying to capitalize on latest industry initiatives? So take a moment to answer that. While the folks are answering, James, I actually do want to fire one question off to you at this point, then we'll come back to some more questions in the future. Morgan had a question about training documents. Were any created by Google for you? How did you briefly go about training your staff to deal with these new tools that they had at their disposal?
Yeah, definitely. Training was a huge thing that we took on, and we held, of course, live training. We held, I think, 20 sessions of live training on just how to use email, how to use the Gmail interface. In addition to that, we found on the deployment site there's templates that you can typical template thing where you replace, put your name here kind of stuff. And so they're basically already created for you and had all the information, user guides and different information like that, things you could put up on the wall in the break room. A lot of information there at the deployment site on training. We also put together, using Google Sites, something that also comes along with the email component, and we were able to build some internal, basically intranet type website that several different people would contribute to different training materials that they felt were useful to their coworkers.
All right. We'll come back to some more questions in a couple of minutes. Again, you see the results of the poll question here. A lot of you looking to reduce your total cost of ownership. The other top vote getters, increased flexibility and scalability. One of the things, Serena, we already touched on briefly from James's perspective was the idea of security. That was a big deal for them. He said early on, very satisfied with things being secure. And, of course, he had that whole fleet of lawyers that could help look over things if need be. While we touch on security just a little bit here, talk a bit about some of the other Google Apps customers, and we'll get to the rest of the questions today.
Okay, terrific. Thanks, James. Yeah, security is very important at Google, and we really look at it from three different ways. One is first people, and one of the things that audience members can do is Google for a live or search for a live webcast called How Google Tackles IT Security. And in that webcast we did last month, we presented a panel of Google security experts who really talk about security from a variety of different dimensions. There's certainly the antivirus, anti-spam, anti-phishing techniques that we're trying to employ, but there are also things around user identity and management and ongoing security and monitoring best practices. So I encourage people who are interested in learning more about security, certainly find that webcast and listen to it, because you'll get a chance to meet the people here at Google whom we employ to basically defend against a variety of different attacks on your behalf. The second thing that actually James had alluded to as well is the process that we employ. We undergo an annual SAS 70 Type 2 audit by independent third-party auditors. So we actually set up a process and protocols that we get tested on to receive the SAS 70 Type 2 audit attestation. And then lastly, of course, we're always thinking about how do we improve our technologies and make sure that our technologies can defend themselves. All of this information is actually covered on a microsite. If you go to www.google.com/apps/security, and we've detailed a lot of this information in the white paper that's attached there too. So if you still have questions about security, I do suggest you reach out and find the information there. I'm going to answer a few questions that have been coming up around encryption and content monitoring and filtering as well. This is something we mentioned early on. There is a functionality within Google Apps Premier Edition that is powered by the Postini services that does enable you to do content monitoring and filtering on email messages. So whether they're intra-domain or outbound email messages that you want to make sure you block because there might be objectionable content, or quarantine because there might be, for example, credit card information that you want to make sure gets sent out encrypted, you can do that. There are two applications that you can purchase on top of Google Apps Premier Edition, again powered by Postini. One is a message encryption product, and one is a message archiving product. Those are separate add-ons, but the basic content monitoring and filtering, antivirus, and anti-spam are actually included within Google Apps Premier Edition. It also seems like there's a bunch of questions from folks on the call about, because we have James Premier here, government pricing. If you're a government agency, it is $50 per user per year. If you are an academic institution or a 501c3 nonprofit, we do offer Google Apps Education Edition for free, and that is fairly similar to Google Apps Premier Edition. There are some features that are slightly different. You don't get 25 gigabytes of inbox storage. You get about 7 gigabytes of inbox storage. So if you're a 501c3 or an educational institution, you can use Google Apps via Google Apps Education Edition for free. One of the other things looks like people were asking about is, who are our customers? The slide that we're showing now basically says, really anyone can be a Google Apps customer. There are no minimum seat requirements. So if you want to sign up for 1 seat or if you want to sign up for 100,000 seats, that's no problem. That's completely up to you. There are smaller cities and governments like the city of Canton, Georgia, who have come up on Google Apps, but then we've also had cities like Washington, D.C., and very recently the city of L.A. and the city of Orlando have also announced that they're moving to Google Apps too. So I hope I've answered those questions. Really, I'd like to leave more time for questions for James.
Absolutely, and as we bring up the final slide here in the deck, some related resources, and again, these links are available on the right-hand side of your player. We'll keep those up for a few moments for you. James, I want to get back into some of the questions. Mark has one for you. It says, how does the remote storage of messages and attachments affect the discoverability of the information there from a production standpoint, is what Mark is asking.
Right, and I assume we're talking about email here. We employ a archiving system in-house, so we dual deliver the emails so we can get them here, and we do discovery here. But we also we're actually looking at moving that system, starting to get a little old and it's a little prone to failure. So we're looking at moving to the Postini service, which gives you a lot of, for just a little bit of additional cost per user. It adds on to the Gmail component and gives you a huge amount of discovery in email, as well as control over filtering content and things like that. Now, Mark, if you're talking about the not Gmail, but actually documents and spreadsheets and things like that through the Google APIs, you can program them to do all kinds of things, and we've got a few different products that we're using for discovery and for archiving copies of documents and spreadsheets back to our servers as well.
One more poll question I'm pushing out to the audience, pretty self-explanatory here. Pick 3 options, any other topics that you'd like more information about from Google and some of the offerings. So go ahead and answer that. We'll pass that information on to the team at Google. Continuing with a question here from Sukumar, and a couple other folks wanted to clarify this as well, James. Did the Attorney General's office, did you switch, along with switching from Exchange to Gmail, did you also switch all of your Microsoft Office components to Google Apps? Do you still have any employees that are still using any Microsoft Office tools? Oh,
absolutely. We still have Microsoft Office version 2003, and it's used every day. It's the way we look at it is, there's always the right tool for the job, and in some cases where we need a lot of collaboration, a lot of times the work process will start off on Google Documents to where you have multiple people working on the same documents. They can see their edits live and use it almost as a conversational piece, but also as a way of building the document. And then when they get ready to polish it up, print it out, maybe it's multiple pages, needs really high-level functions like tables of authorities or some of those things where we have other programs that are built into the Office components to automatically add citations and things like that. Then they'll switch it. They'll download it as a Microsoft document, import it into Microsoft, and do those kinds of things. So we don't discourage any of that. We of course support it. We want them to be able to have all the tools available to get the job done.
Makes sense. Just taking a peek into the poll question, 80+% of our audience is saying they want more information about tools for migration and deployment. And again, the related resources on the right-hand side, you're going to find a couple of those tools by clicking on those related resources. So for those folks who have been answering that way on the poll question, definitely use those related resources. And in fact, we'll keep the player open for a couple minutes after the event, so you can continue to click along. And while you're in there, if you do have additional questions, we'll keep the player open for 2 or 3 minutes after the event. Come back in, drop in your question. Again, we'll get those all over to Serena and her team at Google, try and answer some of those questions. James, we're going to have some more questions that will probably feed your direction, look to give you some answers, and we can get back out to this audience. But before we do wrap things up, I want to jump over to a question representative of a couple of questions that came in. John, we're picking yours. Wanted to know, James, did you need to increase your bandwidth? Did you have to make any other infrastructure upgrades as you made the move over to Google Apps?
Actually, we saw a decrease in bandwidth usage, which was really kind of interesting. A lot of it has to do with the checking going back and forth between the Outlook client and the Exchange server. So in reality, we saw a decrease in bandwidth after we switched.
All right. Let me do this. I want to remind the audience a couple of things. We've had some questions in about recording the event. We have done so. We'll be in contact with everybody with an email after the event so that you can come back and review the presentation, catch up on anything that you might have missed, or simply want to hear again that James had to share about his story or any of the things that Serena has gone over. Also, I encourage folks, if you think there's someone within your organization that could benefit from the presentation, click the email friend link on your player. That'll give you a pop-up. You can fill out the information, the email address of your colleague, send that along to them. They will be able to register and come back to the on-demand version as well. Also, if you want a copy of today's slides, a PDF is available. Just click the Download Slides button from the player, and that will let you use that function and get the PDF. James, really want to thank you for taking time, putting this presentation together, making the switch from a listener to a user and ultimately a presenter here. Appreciate the story, and thank you again for the time.
Great. Thank you, James.
Absolutely. And again, Serena, thanks for your help. We'll, again, we got a ton of questions. Over 162 questions came in from all of you today. So rest assured we will wrap this up in reports and keep Serena and her team busy, looking to get some answers back out to all of you. But appreciate your efforts for coming out for the event. Really do appreciate you being here. Hope it was a good event for all of you attendees. Hope you got some good takeaways and that we were able to answer some of these questions. For the entire Google team, for everyone at Tech Republic and at the Attorney General's office there in New Mexico, we do appreciate you taking time and joining us today. Again, my name is James Hilliard, and we will talk to you down the road.